Welcome to AD Horror Show. On a cool winter night in October, three friends named Sarah, Mark, and Jake embarked on a camping trip deep into the remote woods of Northern California. They had heard tales of strange occurrences in the area but dismissed them as mere campfire stories. Little did they know that their own terrifying experience would soon unfold. On the second night of their trip, as they sat around the campfire, a bone-chilling silence enveloped the forest. The usual sounds of wildlife had ceased, replaced by an eerie stillness. Suddenly, they heard faint, unintelligible whispers that seemed to emanate from the darkness beyond their campsite. Fearful but curious, they grabbed their flashlights and ventured into the woods to investigate. The whispers grew louder, and strange shadows danced between the trees. As they moved deeper into the woods, they came across a dilapidated cabin hidden amongst the trees. It stood there, seemingly abandoned for decades. Against their better judgment, they decided to explore the cabin. Inside, they discovered cryptic symbols scrawled on the walls and a diary dating back to the early 1900s, filled with entries describing disturbing rituals. It was then that they heard a blood-curdling scream from outside the cabin. They rushed out to find their campsite in disarray, their tents torn open, and their belongings scattered. Terrified, they fled the woods and never returned. To this day, they cannot explain the haunting whispers, the sinister cabin, or the unseen presence that seemed to stalk them that night. After their harrowing experience at the abandoned cabin, Sarah, Mark, and Jake found themselves sprinting through the dark woods, guided only by their trembling flashlight beams. The echoes of the blood-curdling scream still reverberated in their ears, adding to their growing sense of dread. As they stumbled through the underbrush, they realized that something was horribly wrong. They couldn't find their way back to the trail that had led them to the cabin. Panic set in, and they began to argue about which direction to go. The forest, once inviting and familiar, now felt like an endless maze of towering trees and thick vegetation. Hours passed as they wandered aimlessly, their desperation deepening with each passing moment. The whispers, now more sinister and taunting, seemed to follow them, as if the very woods were mocking their predicament. Exhausted and terrified, they finally collapsed under a large tree and huddled together, trying to make sense of their situation. As the first light of dawn broke, they gathered their wits and decided to retrace their steps. Miraculously, after what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon the trail that led them back to their campsite. But what they found there was a scene of utter devastation. Their tents were shredded, their food supplies ransacked, and their belongings scattered across the forest floor. It was as if a malevolent force had torn through their campsite in a fit of rage. They quickly gathered what remained of their gear and made a hasty retreat, leaving the cursed woods behind them. Back in the safety of civilization, they tried to make sense of the horrors they had endured. They reported their ordeal to the local authorities, who were baffled by the bizarre events. No rational explanation could account for the whispers, the ominous cabin, or the violent attack on their campsite. Years later, the memory of that fateful camping trip still haunts Sarah, Mark, and Jake. They are left with a chilling sense that they had crossed paths with something ancient and malevolent in the remote woods of Northern California, something that should have remained undisturbed in its dark, hidden corner of the forest. To this day, they can only hope that they never hear those haunting whispers again. In the winter of October 2022, a solo camper named Alex decided to spend a week in the deep woods of the Ozark Mountains. He sought solitude and an escape from the stress of city life. Little did he know that he would encounter something far more unnerving than the solitude he craved. On the third night of his trip, Alex heard footsteps approaching his campsite. Assuming it was a fellow camper, he called out a friendly greeting, but there was no response. The footsteps drew closer but remained silent. Alex's unease grew as he strained to see who was approaching in the darkness. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the trees. It was a man dressed in ragged camping gear, but his face was shrouded in darkness. The stranger stood there, staring at Alex with piercing, unblinking eyes. Fear paralyzed Alex as the intruder continued to watch him without uttering a word. After what felt like an eternity, the mysterious camper turned and vanished into the woods. Alex packed up his gear in a frenzy and hiked out of the forest in the middle of the night, leaving his solitude behind forever. He never encountered the phantom camper again, but the memory of that eerie encounter still haunts him to this day. Alex's escape from the deep woods of the Ozark Mountains that fateful night marked the end of his quest for solitude but the beginning of a relentless obsession with unraveling the mystery of the enigmatic camper. Haunted by the memory of the silent, unblinking stare that had pierced his soul, Alex returned to the city, his urban life now infused with an unnerving curiosity. He spent countless hours researching local legends and unsolved disappearances in the Ozarks, hoping to find a clue that might explain the phantom camper's presence. Months turned into years as Alex's obsession grew. He reached out to other campers who had ventured into the same area, hoping for any scrap of information that could shed light on the strange encounter. Eventually, he discovered a series of stories about a hermit who was rumored to have lived in the Ozark wilderness for decades. This hermit, known as Old Elias, had supposedly vanished without a trace around the same time as Alex's encounter. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex decided to return to the Ozarks, this time with the intention of finding out what had happened to Old Elias. Armed with camping gear, cameras, and a relentless determination, he ventured deep into the wilderness once more. Days turned into weeks as he scoured the woods, interviewing locals and piecing together the hermit's mysterious life. It wasn't long before he stumbled upon a hidden cave, hidden deep within a dense thicket. Inside, he found remnants of a campsite that appeared to have been abandoned for years, along with a collection of old journals belonging to Old Elias. As he read through the journals, he uncovered a chilling tale of isolation, obsession, and encounters with otherworldly entities. Old Elias had believed that the woods held a portal to another realm, and he had dedicated his life to seeking it out. The final entry in the journal described an encounter with a spectral figure dressed in ragged camping gear, the very same figure that Alex had seen. Fearful yet compelled to uncover the truth, Alex pressed deeper into the cave, determined to find answers. But as he descended into the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. Whispers echoed through the cavern, and he felt an unseen presence closing in around him. It was then that Alex realized that the Ozark Mountains held secrets far more profound and chilling than he could have ever imagined. The phantom camper, Old Elias, and the mysteries of the deep woods were all connected in ways he could scarcely comprehend. As he ventured further into the heart of the Ozarks, he couldn't help but wonder if he had unwittingly become a part of their enigmatic, eerie tapestry, forever entangled in the haunting mysteries of the forest. On the cool snowing winter night of 2022, 4 friends named Emily, James, Lily, and Mike embarked on a camping trip to the dense woods of the Appalachian Mountains. They set up their campsite near a serene lake, looking forward to a relaxing weekend in nature. However, their trip took a horrifying turn on the second night. As they sat around the campfire, they heard distant, haunting cries in the darkness. At first, they brushed it off as the sounds of wildlife, but the cries grew louder and more human-like. Unease settled over the group as they realized the cries were coming from the direction of the lake. Curiosity overcame their fear, and they decided to investigate. Carrying flashlights, they made their way to the lake's edge. There, they saw something that left them paralyzed with terror. At the water's edge, they saw the silhouettes of their own friends, Emily, James, and Lily, standing waist-deep in the lake, facing away from them. Mike called out to them, but they didn't respond. He waded into the water, desperately trying to reach them, but the figures seemed to recede further into the lake. Panic set in as he realized he was now alone in the water. He turned back to shore, only to find that the campfire had gone out, plunging the campsite into darkness. In a state of sheer terror, Mike stumbled back to the campsite, but when he arrived, he found it deserted. The tents were empty, and there was no sign of his friends. Frantic and disoriented, he searched the woods throughout the night but never found them. The next morning, he hiked out of the woods, leaving behind the horrifying mystery of his friend's disappearance, which remains unsolved to this day. These chilling camping in woods horror stories serve as a reminder that the tranquility of nature can sometimes conceal dark and unexplainable mysteries. The morning light broke over the dense woods of the Appalachian Mountains, casting an eerie pallor on the abandoned campsite. Mike, disheveled and haunted by the night's events, stumbled out of the forest, leaving behind the unsettling darkness that had engulfed him. As he made his way back to civilization, Mike couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to him. The memory of Emily, James, and Lily standing waist-deep in the lake, their figures shrouded in darkness, haunted his thoughts. He had called out to them, reached out desperately, but they had seemed distant and unreachable, as if trapped in some otherworldly trance. Returning to town, Mike immediately contacted the local authorities and reported his friend's disappearance. Search and rescue teams combed through the woods, and the lake was dredged, but no trace of Emily, James, or Lily was ever found. It was as if they had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an unsettling mystery that sent shivers through the tight-knit mountain community. Mike, plagued by guilt and sorrow, was subjected to countless interviews and investigations, but there was no evidence to suggest foul play or any logical explanation for his friend's disappearance. He became an outcast in the town, blamed by some for his failure to save his friends and regarded with suspicion by others. Years passed, and the unsettling events of that night faded into local legend. The lake where Emily, James, and Lily had disappeared became known as the Lake of Lost Souls, and it was said that the spirits of those who vanished there continued to cry out for help on dark, moonless nights. Mike never returned to the Appalachian Mountains, haunted by the memories of that fateful camping trip. He moved far away, trying to escape the shadows of the past. But every night, in the quiet moments before sleep, he could still hear the distant, haunting cries in the darkness, as if the spirits of his friends were calling out to him from beyond the veil of the unknown. The mystery of the Lake of Lost Souls remained unsolved, a chilling reminder that the tranquility of nature can indeed conceal dark and unexplainable mysteries, forever etched in the annals of the Appalachian Mountains.